Hey, good evening. Kelly O'Connell, author and attorney, and doing a little podcast on a topic that I just wrote an article on, and the issue is about the weird thing that's going on in America right now, which is one party doing everything or anything that they want to, no matter how shocking, no matter how outside of the rules, and what the purpose is behind that. And then trying to figure out where that's coming from. And I actually have another article in mind that I'm going to do, but this one is just based on nihilism, which is, think of the word kneel, kneeling, nihilism, and put ism on it. Before I get into this, though, I don't know if you've had a chance to catch up with the news. Norm Macdonald, the famous comedian, died, and the more I listened to him, the more I loved him. And the thing about him is what they said, even though he wasn't the most famous, he wasn't the richest comedian, and he was from Canada, but they said when other comedians felt depressed, they would go find Norm Macdonald on YouTube and listen to his old sets, and he was just really out of the box and kind of wild. And one of the things that I liked about him is he was very honest. And number one, he claimed to be a Christian, which I haven't heard any other comedian say, mainstream comedian. But another thing that he did was he would go after people that were kind of fakes, but not make it too personal, you know. But he was just brilliant, very, very funny, and didn't tell anybody that he had cancer. And he was, I think, 61. He still had a lot of good years left, but he's gone, so go look him up. All right, so I'm thinking about this. There's certain things that have happened with his administration, and I don't care. I mean, it doesn't bother me to call out Democrats. It used to bother me because I would say to myself, if I make the statement that I think that Democrats are a bad party and are full of bad ideas, then people will consider me biased. And I don't know if that's an issue anymore because there's so many biased people out there. And think of all the individuals that you know who hated Trump and would talk about him at the drop of the hat. Did those people ever care about anybody who was a Republican, anybody who was conservative, anybody who was maybe middle of the road, or even a Democrat who liked him? No, they didn't care because they acted like they had stumbled upon some truth that Donald Trump was Hitler, is a neo-Hitler, that he was the Antichrist, and they tore him up. And I listened to that, and all I saw in that was, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, a guy who went maybe a little bit over the top in confronting people, a little bit over the top in how he came back and slammed people. But I would temper that with the fact that he was attacked from before he went into the office. And it was lie after lie after lie, like this one right now. Milley claiming that Trump was a danger to attack China with nuclear weapons. I mean, that makes zero sense. There's nothing in his presidency that would measure up to even that being a possibility. But I think what I recognized more than anything was that there's a change, and we're no longer really a Christian nation. We are a nation of people. Some of them are Christians, and they don't say much. The other percentage, though, there's a lot of people that are kind of pagan, or they're humanistic. And they've caught up with this idea that they can become somebody great by fighting for humanism, to fight against evil. And so they fought against Trump, and they thought that they were doing something great for humanity. But it was more than anything that I thought of when I heard people attacking Trump day after day after day. And you got it in the news. You got it in people in entertainment. You got it in people in high positions on both sides of the aisle. You got it from foreigners. You got all this. What I thought to myself was propaganda. These people have been propagandized, and they loved it. They loved getting all of these these so-called facts about Trump that he was a Satan. And I really had to shake my head because we've got serious issues out there, and if Trump can help deal with them, give him a little support. Don't claim he's the next Hitler when all you're doing is making yourself feel better that you believe that you're attacking somebody who's evil. Because think back, if these people were in Germany and they were there when Hitler was rising, how many of these people who went after Trump with all of our freedoms and the media that is so far left, and the mainstream media, the news cycle that's so far left, how many of these people would have stood up to Trump? Not to Trump, but to Hitler? It doesn't. The answer is none. Now, one other thing that I did yesterday is I went to Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, it's a city on the border of El Paso, and I'll tell you about it some other time, but I had a fantastic time, incredible food, and almost everybody you meet there doesn't speak any English, and it's weird because where we were at was less than a mile from El Paso. All right, so let me get into this, and I'm wheezing a little bit. I've got some allergies, but pardon me on that. My article name is Permanent Screw-Ups, Why Democrats Think Everything They Do is Morally Correct. And then a subheading, Thomas Hardy, who said, do not do an immoral thing for moral reasons. And I think that that's where we're at right now. There's a lot of people on the left who think they're the smartest individuals in the world. They do what they believe they can get away with, and they think they're 10 times smarter than anybody who disagrees with. Okay, so now what do you think is wrong with Democrats? Now, I've heard some people defending Biden. Maybe not a lot. They were doing it before Afghanistan. Now, he was in Afghanistan and he decided that he was going to leave. Now, Biden's administration has blamed everything on Trump. And if you go back to Obama blamed everything on George Bush, and I don't understand why George Bush is buddies with Obama now after all the terrible things he said about him. It just makes you cynical about the process. And George Bush is another person. He's, best friends with Michelle Obama and whatever. But he got up, and Bush got up, and he put together January 6th with 9/11, which I didn't really appreciate and thought was absurd. But anyway, pardon me. So here's the issue that I see. You understand the concept of lawlessness and doing things as if there were no rules. And if you hear a bunch of breaks, it's because I'm trying to clear my throat and blow my nose because suddenly I got hit with this allergy bomb. But so here's one of the things. Democrats making kind of crazy and lawless decisions, not to be a parrot, not to restate the obvious, but leaving Afghanistan before Americans out. And there have to be thousands of Americans left over there. Giving them the weapons, leaving information about our allies that's going to get them killed, and all of these things. One of the strangest things I've seen was when Biden's administration took credit for removing people that had escaped or they had friends who came over and helped them escape because the Americans weren't helping them leave, and then the Biden administration took credit for it. I mean, why didn't Biden just remove everybody with U.S. military? There is this mental block that I think leftists have where they have to abase themselves. They have to make themselves smaller than the forces around them to feel better. They must feel guilty, but you had all the strength in the world to remove people, and you didn't do it, but now you're taking credit for other people who at great risk to themselves are coming into Kabul and smuggling Americans out. It's part of a larger thing which is totally insane, which I experience as kind of surreal. It's like a theater of the absurd. So leftism proposes something, the idea that radical politicians can also represent everyday Americans. Now, I think you're either an advocate for leftism or socialism, Marxism, communism, progressivism, whatever you want to call it, or you're a politician that gets up and represents people, and it's this strange conceit that these leftists have that they can do things to advance leftism and at the same time represent people, and so that's why their decision making is so bad. Now, Gavin Newsom might have won on the recall, but that's no victory. I mean, he avoided the gallows, but he's been a terrible politician. So he goes and shuts down oil production in the name of global warming, of course. There's a lot of oil in California, but they're not going to do it. They're going to go to some other country that don't have nearly the rules and regulations that we do and buy their oil. They think they're going green, but there's not enough energy in the grid. There's not enough charging stations. Now, if you follow Michael Moore, who I realize has done some terrible things to attack the right, but he had this thing, and let me go find the name of it. But he had this movie in which he exposed how bad these renewable energy was. What a fake. And I'm just going to look up the title of this film. You got to go see it. And it's just jaw-dropping. And I realized that Michael Moore, and here's a really ridiculous review. What Michael Moore's new climate documentary gets wrong about renewables. Planet of the Humans, go see it. I mean, it's just astounding. And so what you're doing is, and it's so superficial, you're claiming that cars can run off of energy, electricity, and they can run, and they're not going to pollute. And the fact of the matter is that when they make the energy, it's full of pollution. So it's a boondoggle. And so you see a lot of this kind of thing in leftism where the truth isn't told. So these radical politicians, they can't do it both ways. That's why you have people like Pelosi, lives in a city that has been just destroyed by leftism. San Francisco, there's needles everywhere on the ground. There's human feces. There's homeless people all over. Crime is through the roof. Now they've got a problem where people come into drugstores, or they come into department stores and steal. As long as they steal under $1,000, they can't be stopped. Now, who wants to live in that kind of a state, that kind of a city? So there's so many lies on so many different levels. But what does the average American want? They want stable and well-paying jobs, low inflation, cheap energy, police protection, and strong resistance to foreign enemies. Do people really want much more than that? Maybe a good movie once a week. They want to take a vacation, maybe go to a lake and catch a few fish. And yet leftists will sacrifice any and all of the above to maneuver America into a weakened posture to therefore pursue their dreams, which are an international utopian superstate. And the reason it's hard for people to focus on that is because it seems so unlikely and weird. Why would people like Pelosi and Schumer and this idiot other senator or congressman that's in California that I can't remember his name, but was on this committee that kept attacking and accusing Trump of all these things, and Adam Schiff, all of the lies. It's harming America. Why do they do it? They weaken America to pursue their dreams of this utopia. And let me ask you this. We'll have probably between 2 and 2.5 million people cross the border into America each month. 200,000, pardon me. And it'll be between 2 and 3 million people that end up in here. How does that directly help America? Now, you can say that we're doing the right thing by bringing in these foreigners, but they're not vetted. A lot of them, they don't know who they are. If they're if they're people who have been convicted for sex assaults or thefts, various crimes, except for murder, attempted murder, that type of thing, they'll let them in. How does that benefit America? So it just goes to show you, like the stuff that happened in Afghanistan, liberals don't believe in laws. The belief there are no rules for human behavior is called nihilism. Think of your knee, kneeling down, nihilism. Or you can call it nihilism, like the river in Africa, nihilism. Nietzsche, the famous philosopher who went crazy, described nihilism as the state where everything is permitted, which is apparently what the liberals believe in, the Democrats. For example, no one can claim, the fact American Democrats are nihilists is deducted by simple observation of their actions. For example, no one can claim legalizing 60 million murders of unborn humans is ethical or moral, let alone a human right. That's what they say. People have a right to kill babies. I'm not sensationalizing it. I'm telling you just straightforwardly. Now, Stanley Rosen wrote a beautiful book called Nihilism, and he sums up one of the most important aspects of nihilism. If you believe there's no rules, if you believe that there's no laws, you have a problem, and this is what they call the contradiction of nihilism. You have to establish some rules for yourself. Like, just say somebody comes in and tries to steal your stuff from you. If you're a true nihilist, you can't stop them if you're following your beliefs, because there's no rule against theft. So what happens is you reject external laws, the Constitution, the rules of the state, of the city, the county, whatever, the rules of any religion, but you have to establish some rules just to survive. So the irony that comes here, the contradiction, is that each person becomes a god by declaring their own truths, but because of the way you approach it, you can't prove that they're true. It just becomes very arbitrary. And so I argue, therefore, nihilism implies that the only antidote to lawlessness is God. And I'll get into that later. This is not an extremely religious article. It's just stating the obvious. So how do we fight against this? What can be done against these transparently harmful actions that Democrats are engaging right now? I mean, we shut down oil production in the country. Now, you can buy into this idea that the left is following mystical Marxism, mystical socialism, in which if we do the right things, all pieces are going to fall together like in evolution, right? If you're an evolutionist. But the problem is that history shows us that that is not usually how things work. So to counteract this, Americans must learn U.S. history, why we came up with the ideas that we did, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and everyday logic. Now, at the same time, Republicans and patriots must call out these actions and explain exactly why Democrats are doing unconstitutional things and how exactly it is harmful. Put it down, like prove it, think your way through it. They have to be detailed briefly and succinctly, short and to the point, and on the button arguments. Most of all, we must become better educated in our own history and government to win every debate, for the fight we are engaged in will decide the future of our country. Now, Dems propaganda. Dems don't explain why they engage in extreme destructiveness outside of offering infuriating excuses such as loving foreign immigrants or fighting global warming. Let me ask you one question about global warming, and I'll actually ask you two questions. The first one is, how much change do you see in global warming? Other than these sensational articles, hottest year on record, hottest temperature, flooding in Florida or wherever, how do you experience it in real life? And the fact is, you don't. Now, the reason is either that it's too subtle to notice or it's not true. If it's too subtle to notice it, how is it true? You see what I'm saying? And the second question is, how many predictions in the past do you think, the past 50 years that were made about global warming have come true? Specific predictions. And the answer is 0. And the reason for that is the same reason that you can't get the weather right in 1 week, let alone in 1 year or 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years. It's too difficult, and there's too many things influencing the weather. So, while the president is telling you he's running out of patience for Americans to get vaccinated, he is concurrently, or at the same time, sending millions of untested, unvaccinated, COVID-sick illegals across the U.S. this year. It is quite possible, since some of the sheriffs on the border have said that about half of the people who are coming into the country may be sick with COVID, but they're saying at least 20% of the people are coming here. If you get 2.5 million people in here this year and 20% of them are sick, that's very conservative. You've got 200,000 plus 200,000 plus 100,000. That's 500,000 people sick with COVID. They're not being tested for the most part. They're not being vaccinated. Then they're being sent across the nation, apparently, so that they can get absorbed into communities. And the dream is that Biden would give them immediate citizenship and that they would immediately start voting for Democrats. And that way, in all of these states where there is a close race, swing states, they'd all become Democrat. And then the Democrats don't ever have to worry about winning national elections anymore because they've got all these people who are so thankful. But why is it the least educated people are default Democrats? You should ask yourself that. So one reason Democrats operate this way is because their motivations are wholly objectionable, being un-American and illiterate, policies leading to disaster. But another reason is as follows. Leftists believe in the idea of failing upwards. Failing upwards. Remember that phrase. Wherever U.S. mistake is beneficial to socialists dreaming that humanity is destined for a utopian world social state. Now, sadly, Democrats believe their dreams can only be achieved by an American collapse. We're the one thing keeping the world from going utopian. Scary, huh? Now, I'll conclude here by saying that the left is always using real evil to destroy fake disasters. Democrats offer as their greatest evils dramatic, unprovable facts like global warming, destroying the earth, or desperately battling contrived catastrophes like racial injustice. Now, do you know how General Milley got up and lectured on why the chief goal of the military was to fight against racial injustice and go attack white privilege, and explain to white soldiers why it's so evil that they have white privilege and the inherent racism of white people. But while he's doing that, he's not planning well for Afghanistan. But he also did something else. He claimed that Trump was going to attack China, or was planning on it. And so he called up China and said, don't worry, if we attack you, I'll phone ahead. I'll let you know. So this guy needs to be removed from office because he's working for himself. He is one of these humanistic great warriors. He is a woke superstar who's going around fighting evil. So he's given up the chain of command. He's now working for the universe. Now, since Democrats don't believe truth exists, they must not believe that because they're so contradicting themselves so often. So often do they do that. So they can constantly concoct one lie after another to mislead America. But remember Dostoevsky's warning that if God doesn't exist, everything is possible. And that should scare you a little bit, because we're no longer a religious nation. As Democrats are America's worst threat, We must stand against them while planning for a society that offers genuine justice without propagandizing our brothers into a war against each other in their crazed battle for utopia. In the midst of national catastrophes, only a good God can save a lost America as we've known and experienced since our beginning at Plymouth Rock. All right, now let's get into a little bit of weird news. Okay, so I got 3 weird news stories for you here. The first one about a cat, and it was flying, there was a flight from Qatar in the Middle East, and it is believed that, this is from March 3rd, by the way, the cat had somehow infiltrated the plane the night before and was sitting in there, and then when the plane took off, the cat became active, and it ended up dashing up to the front of the plane and getting into the booth for the pilot. And so they had to try to fend off the cat, and it was not possible. The cat was going after the pilot, and so ultimately the plane had to be turned around and landed. So, all right, the second 2 stories are related, not directly, but this is the Pope Patrol in San Francisco, and I had mentioned that San Francisco had become a really crazy place because of all of the crimes, all of the homeless people. And so they've come up with a Poop Patrol, and it is called Open Books, and they represent to take a call, hotline calls. And if you looked at the number of poop reports in San Francisco, it's astounding. It's really unbelievable. And I'll tell you how the chart works out. Between 2011 and 2018, just listen to this. In 2011, there were 5,500 poop reports. 2012, 6,300. 2013, 8,700. 2014, about 11,000. 2015, about 13,000. 2016, about 18,000. 2017, 21,000. 2018, 28,000. And it's grown since then. And so part of it is the cost of housing in San Francisco, but another part is that these far leftists want to dote on the homeless and give them as much respect and support as possible. So the Poop Patrol is bringing workers in, and under the Public Works, this is not private people. They are sent to where the human feces in, and sometimes it's dog feces. They're given facial masks. They have disinfectant. They have a, spray guns and everything. They scrape up the poop, and they disinfect the area. And it's much worse than it is in New York City. So, all right, here is a story that is totally bizarre, that is a couple of years old. The Mad Pooper, and this is from Colorado Springs, and it's a lady that is a jogger, and she goes around. Her nickname is the Mad Pooper. Her handle is Shirley, and she's been supposedly terrorizing residents by stopping during her runs and pooping on people's lawns, sometimes in front of children. So far, they have not been able to catch her. Now, she has a spokesperson, and the spokesperson explained that Shirley is sorry for desecrating people's lawns, but she cannot be held accountable since she's suffering from a traumatic brain injury and has also gone through gender reassignment surgery and can no longer control her bowels. And the spokesman said that this is akin to free speech, that she's got a free speech right to poop where she wants. And they compared it to breastfeeding. There's no difference between breastfeeding and pooping on somebody's line. And there's been some disagreement from some legal experts. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. And I hope you have a great day. Kelly O'Connell, and we'll catch up with you soon. And help me think about this issue of nihilism and how we can have laws and rules that even the politicians have to follow. Have a great day. Knockout Radio, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow. Ciao.